I'm Lisa Hirmer. I'm an artist based in Guelph, but I work under the name DodoLab. It's an old name that's stuck around for a long time. The work always has to do with the public, so it's always working in public with the public. And the name comes from, lab, because it's experimental and constantly shifting, and dodo just because it started with questions around resilience and adapting to changing circumstances and also vulnerability to change. So this piece is called To the Synanthropes, and Synanthropes are species that thrive in human-created and occupied environments. So they're often the species we think of as pests. So, rats, squirrels, in this case Canada geese, ducks. And so the project started with just an interest in the way these species start to break down some of our ideas of nature. A lot of our ideas about nature imagine it as a place apart, so there's the human world and the natural world, and there's species that really transgress that boundary. So, sometimes we think of them as invading our space, but often they're there because we've created the perfect material conditions for them to thrive. Canada geese, for example, were almost extinct at the turn of the last century, and through our efforts to restore the population, but then also just creating a lot of spaces that are their perfect environment, they've now become this really abundant pest. Yeah, so the project is also looking at searching for new ways of understanding our place in the world in the Anthropocene. So at the point now where human impact on the planet measures at the scale of the geologic, our old models just aren't really fitting. They're not really productive for us, and so it's part of a series of projects I've been doing, just trying to pick apart some of those ideas and create space for maybe new relationships and new models of understanding. I think part of the project is leaving it open as a question to what different models would be, but I think some people talk about an ecology without nature, so rather than defaulting to this idea of a perfect nature and avoiding making decisions and making hard choices about what we want and what we don't want, you can imagine just looking at it in a material way or an ecological way, and then starting to say, okay, what do we want our landscapes to look like and perform like, and what other creatures or species are we engaging with, and how? Which ones are we encouraging, which ones are we discouraging, and why? And I think those are really big, complicated questions, which is why we like to avoid them. The thing with Synanthropes, so there are all these species that we're encouraging and creating perfect environments for. We have to remember there's then, therefore, a whole bunch of species whose habitats we've either modified or destroyed, or in other ways we've created conditions in which they can't thrive. So there's always the flip side. By creating one environment, you're encouraging some species and discouraging others. And so, for example, parks, we have this aesthetic ideal of a park of green lawns and a few tall trees, and that's really perfect for squirrels and geese. Oftentimes we want a water feature, so then we get geese and ducks. But you can imagine that there's the possibility of a multiplicity of kind of parks that have different environments in them, and they would just look different to what we imagined the park to be. So the project has two parts. The first part involved surveying the public, and the second part is creating these installations, and they're related directly to the responses we got in the first part. So we asked people if they were able to send some kind of message to the synanthropes around them. What do they wish they could say? And some people love them, some people hate them. A lot of people had really contradictory responses. So we both love them, to ornament the park or to be cute or to make us feel like we're connecting with other species or nature. But then we hate all the consequences of that. So when there's too many geese, or they're aggressive, or they're asking for food, or they invade our housing space. So I think we really hold on to this really contradictory view. I'm hoping that in thinking through some of these ideas we project onto other species and to nature, that it creates questions or maybe a little bit of space for new ideas to emerge. I think we make a lot of decisions based on certain ideas about nature that aren't necessarily ecologically true. So if we can start unpacking those ideas, that maybe there's the potential to lead to different decisions being made, or yeah, different spaces being created. My favorite synanthrope. I would say Canada geese. I think they really polarize people. Like some people really hate Canada geese, some people love them. I think their history is really interesting. It's really, really tangled with humans. Even though we really like to imagine them as wild birds. They're classified as migratory birds, but a lot of them don't migrate anymore, so they're just this like really complicated species. All the messages they're the human messages pulled out of those surveys. Obviously the Synanthropes can't read the words, but they are trying to be positioned in the material ways we already interact with them. So, you know, people feed birds birdseed, the aesthetic choice of the park, gardens, garbage. They're trying to find those material moments, and so the Synanthropes will read the pieces materially and humans will read the messages.